Welcome into the Merrifield Sportsbook Show. It is week 7 of the college football season. This is the week that has been talked about all year for you not playing your wedding this weekend because just the matchups we have this weekend are insane. Well, for me personally, it was difficult finding 5 picks for my parlay this week. We still have some great matchups. Vegas is just wanting to steal your money with some of these. There's just some great ones out there. But as usual, it's Jay DeCoster, Justin Walsh, Matt Merrifield joining in once again. Jay, big news as we record here on Tuesday. Big news coming out of your city of Chicago today as former U.S. manager Greg Berhalter has taken the job with the Chicago Fire. What are the vibes in Chicago right now, and are they planning the parade yet for the 2025 MLS Cup champion Chicago Fire?
All five Chicago Fire fans are just so happy to watch Berhalter ball at Soldier Field, at the great venue of Soldier Field. Berhalter ball is about to be a whole new level of just electricity over there. So everyone is so fired up. Definitely not Caleb Williams, who threw for 2 touchdowns. Nobody's hyped about that. Everyone's hyped about Berhalter ball. So we're excited.
As they should be. I mean, Berhalter ball is the peak of football just in general. So Justin Walsh, you had a interesting weekend apparently. It was your sister's wedding. How did that go? Your second wedding, at least that I know of, in at least 3 months or something along those lines.
Yes, it was a good time. You know, anytime you go to a wedding kind of or any kind of venue like that, an event that has that kind of meaning, it really gets you thinking about, the things that you want in life. And, obviously the future isn't quite set. I'd love to, get a family, have a couple kids here and there, but all I know after this weekend is that my firstborn child will be named Carrie. And, I needed to throw that one in there just because, I mean, they don't call him Carrie Bonds for nothing. So I'd like to kind of open the floor to you, Mr. Nick Burt, and ask you, were there any sporting events that happened over the last day or so that, you wanted to talk about, you wanted to bring up here that we could, further discuss?
Well, I mean, if you want, I can go. I mean, you can check the video, but I mean, we can talk about Tottenham collapsing, losing 3-2 at Brighton on Sunday. That was just absolutely disgusting. That team quit at halftime. But I'm sure that's not what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure you're talking about the Padres, isn't it? Isn't that what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. The Padres are a solid team. They're a very good playoff team. But I was talking about another collapse that was, a little bit closer to home, one that was on the banks of Lake Erie in beautiful Cleveland, Michigan, at Progressive Field, when Emmanuel Clase, who was supposedly a Cy Young candidate and was supposedly supposed to win it over, American League Triple Crown winner Tarek Skubal, give up a 3-run bomb to the handsomest man in baseball to give the Tigers a 1-1 split in Cleveland before heading back to Detroit. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that whole occurrence.
Well, good thing for Class A is the Cy Young is regular season award, so still alive there. I may be making that up. It may not be. I honestly have no idea. I'm sure it is, but still feeling good. Some have deemed tomorrow as we record this on Tuesday. So this will be game 3. The series may be over by the time you see this Friday morning. But some people are saying game 3 is a must win for the Guardians. I am one of those people. It's a must win. It's simple as that. You have to finish out the series in 4. It's simple as that. So you got to win both games on the road. I don't see any other way the Guardians advance in this one. And yeah, that's all I got to say. Fun times.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go over my time. You can go ahead and continue the show.
It doesn't matter, J Walsh. Matt Merrifield, you've started in the OHL with the Flint Firebirds. How are things going in the O right now?
OHL hockey might be my least favorite and favorite form of hockey at the same time because the games are so effing long for no reason. I don't know how. The first whistle of the game on Saturday night between the Flint Firebirds and Sarnia Sting wasn't until the 4-minute mark of the first period, and yet somehow the game still took 2.5 hours. And I don't know why, because it's not like they're selling billions of commercials. I know CHL TV, the way we broadcast her, does have advertisement, but I don't know why these games take so long. Every whistle is like a debate between the players where they all try to fight each other. But it is incredible hockey, and it's quite sicko. And the fact that there were more people at Michigan State women's soccer on Saturday than there were at a Flint Firebirds hockey game just somehow doesn't sit right with me, even though it makes a lot of sense if we're being honest here. But it's been a great experience so far. And Nick, you said this week's slate sucks for finding picks. You are wrong. You just have to dig through the weeds and you will find gems. And I have 5 gems coming up on this show.
We'll see about that, Matt, because I struggled finding 2 picks. So, I mean, you're probably right in this scenario, but still, it's going to be a tough week. But I think before we look forward, we got to go back. Last week was an insane week. You had to keep your head on a swivel everywhere. Figured I'd just go around the room right now. So, Jay Walsh, I'll start with you. Just pick out your favorite moment from last week, whether that be a certain team losing or any of that fun stuff.
You know, I did watch a fair amount of football this weekend, despite it being the weekend of my sister's wedding. We stayed with a bunch of cousins at a Airbnb, and just kind of had football on pretty much the entire time. We weren't at an actual event. And I think my favorite event, or my favorite part of the weekend, was watching the Washington Huskies just step on the throat of the Michigan Wolverines. It was a wonderful thing to watch. I know I personally enjoyed it very much. And as a Michigan State fan who unfortunately did watch the Michigan State game this weekend, that there's not really a whole lot of good that I can take out of that game. So I take solace in the fact that the team that I hate most just did not prosper. So that was my favorite moment of the weekend.
Matt, we'll go to you next. Obviously, you had some prior commitments, as we mentioned on Saturday, but I know you were still texting me. You knew everything that was going on. So what was your favorite moment of the weekend?
It has to be the algorithm at 9 in the morning, 6 a.m. local time, having their band wake up at 3 in the morning for college game day. That was an incredible experience. And I mean, who would have known that the woke left would love to stand outside all morning with picket signs and just stand there and yell things? But it was perfect. And somehow Pat McAfee and the woke left are like a marriage made in heaven. And it's so perfect because they're so polar opposite. So yeah, that was the games last weekend. I know we had a bunch of upsets, but it was kind of terrible football. Like there wasn't a lot of good football being played this weekend. That's part of the reason why there were so many upsets. So, but the algorithm, props to you. You might not be relevant the rest of the year, but you did your job. And you got, the game was rigged. They should have won that game. The refs wanted Miami to win, but it's fine.
Yeah, Matt, I was just about to say the algorithm in the morning was fine. And then, when it was 2 a.m. on the East Coast, the algorithm fell apart. Absolutely obliterated. Jay, we'll end with you. Your favorite moment of the weekend.
Well, shout out Reese Davis, who called that game, had like no voice by the end of the night. He was struggling out there. Props to him for even finishing that game. I'm going to go with that Boise State game, even though Ashton Genty had a huge game. Shout out to the over, which hit in the first half, 62-30 finals. That was the easiest bet I think I've hit all year. So I will go with Boise State and Ashton Genty, who he's the Heisman frontrunner right now. This guy's absolutely ridiculous. So I will go with Ashton Genty and Boise State routing Utah State 62-30 because he's honestly must-watch television, even though most of the games they play are late. So, I mean, shout out to him.
Well, Jay, I know you just said most of his games are late. You can't get any later this weekend for Ashton Genty. I know you'll be discussing that later. We'll obviously get to that. But for me, I mean, watching social media post the Vanderbilt game, following the goalpost down Broadway in Nashville, that was quite electric. And then, of course, Monday afternoon, Paul Feinbaum show. We had some great calls from Alabama fans who think the sky is falling, and it may be. Who knows? Some of them probably know a little bit more than Kalen DeBoer does right now, seems, maybe. So, hey, sometimes you got to let legend from Alabama just talk. This is his therapy. So, just a great weekend for content, it felt like. So I felt like we had to do that little bit look back before we move forward. But for the first time here on the Merrifield Sportsbook Show, we are bringing in a great segment. This has been followed along for years now. It hasn't been it's been Justin Walsh putting this together. The definitive college football rankings. It is the J Walsh Rankings for the first time this season. J Walsh, I will give you the floor since these are your rankings. Figure we will give you the top 15 in college football right now, plus a group of 5 because they may not be ranked in the top 15. And then after that, we will take a look at what the playoffs would look like today if it ended with the J Walsh Rankings. So J Walsh, take it away.
Thank you very much. And before we get into the rankings themselves, I would just like to kind of lay out the base rules of the ranking, which is it is not a predictive measure. This is not what I think will happen by the end of the season. This is if the season ended today, what it should be. And I would just like to kind of inform our listeners that if anyone has any issues or any questions or any disagreements about these rankings, no, you don't, because you are wrong. The rankings are the rankings. The model is the model. It is correct always. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, let's get into it. We will start with our top ranked group of 5 teams since they did not make the top 15 of the rankings this week, and that is going to be Boise State. I mean, what else can you say about Boise State aside from they're kind of being carried by one player right now? Ashton Genty is the kind of name across the country at the moment. He realistically should be, if he isn't already, the Heisman frontrunner. The reason they did not crack the top 15 this week, and it's a reason why, unless they basically win out, they're going to have trouble cracking that top 10 to 15, is because they simply haven't beaten anybody. I mean, they had a very close game against Oregon, the second game of the season, lost 37-34. Aside from that, their best win is probably a home victory against Washington State. I mean, they really have not played a difficult schedule thus far. They have the most electric player in the country. They are pretty much clearing away the top group of 5 team. But I do need to see a little bit more out of them before we can definitively put them in the top 15. Therefore, we will start with number 15. We will go with Illinois. They are, they're just a solid team from the Big Ten. Nothing too crazy, but they play just about everybody tough. I mean, they've had a couple of decent wins to start this year. There's not really a whole lot you can say about them except for they're a solid team. They deserve to be in consideration. Number 14, and this is where we may get a little bit dicey here, we have Ole Miss. Now, this is probably the biggest difference in the J Walsh rankings versus the AP rankings that just came out a couple days ago. Ole Miss has played absolutely nobody this season. They don't have a single marquee win to start this entire year. And I'm taking a look at their schedule right now. I mean, they lost to Kentucky. Last week they won against South Carolina, who really has been kind of very up and down this year. Aside from that, they played Wake Forest, Middle Tennessee State, Georgia Southern, Furman. I mean, this is a team that literally has not been tested against top opponents this year. Now, that will 100% change this week when they travel to face LSU. If they can get out of Death Valley with a win, they will definitely fly up these rankings. But as of right now, cannot justify them over 14. Number 13, we have the Indiana Hoosiers, like the SIG. Indiana, kind of the same thing. They've flown through their schedule thus far. First team to be 6-0, first team for bowl eligibility, but they really haven't played anybody yet. They have a big opportunity to, after their bye week this week, they will be hosting Nebraska, and that will be a big test for them. If they can come out of that game with a solid win, I will definitely be kind of forced to give Indiana a little bit more credit, but until then, they're kind of right on the edge. Number 12, we have Texas A&M, who, they got off to the rough start against Notre Dame in the first game of the year, but since then, they've really gone on a nice bounce back. I mean, they rattled off a couple decent wins. Obviously, you've got the brunt of an SEC schedule coming up, so we'll see what happens with them the rest of the year, but I think 12 is a reasonable spot for them for the time being. Right above them is the team that they lost to first game of the season, Notre Dame. And I see a lot of people, including the College Football Playoff Committee from years past, justifying ranking teams over others based on quality of losses. I completely disagree with the concept. I think the results on the field should matter. And when one team beats another team, especially if that's a road victory against that other team, they deserve to be ranked higher until further notice. So Notre Dame ranked above Texas A&M. Again, Notre Dame has a couple decent wins. They're coming off a nice win over Louisville last week. We'll see where they end up throughout the season. Coming in at number 10, we have BYU, who, again, I mean, has a couple decent wins on the schedule, undefeated to start this season. They are one of the better teams in the Big 12, definitely going to be in contention for that Big 12 playoff spot. Just kind of remains to be seen where they finish throughout the year. Coming in at number 9, we have Tennessee. I mean, I'm not even going to attempt to butcher that last name, but Nico I has been kind of a revelation to start the year. They had a little bit of a slip up against Arkansas last week. We'll see how they respond. They're getting a pretty easy opponent this week in a kind of lost Florida team. But they going into that loss to Arkansas, they were coming off a nice win over Oklahoma. And before that, they were just blitzing people. So, I mean, Tennessee has all the potential in the world. They just need to be able to find it consistently. Coming in at number 8, we have Iowa State. And this is one that I may get a little bit of pushback on. I'd love to get your guys' opinions on this after we reveal the full rankings. But Iowa State, undefeated, right now at the top of the Big 12 standings. They also haven't really played any huge opponents yet. They have a good win against Iowa at Iowa in Kinnick Stadium, which is always a tough place to play. Really looking forward to seeing what they can do this coming week when they travel to West Virginia. I think that'll be a decent test for them. And then obviously they have a couple tough games to end the season against Utah and Kansas State in the Big 12 slate. We will see where they end up. Coming in at number 7, we have Miami, and realistically, Miami would be higher on this list if not for the fact that they probably should have lost their last 2 games. They have gotten significant help from referees in each of their last 2 games with the kind of Hail Mary attempt against against Virginia Tech. And then obviously we already discussed the Calgary being screwed out of that game a little bit by the Stripes. So you got to give it to Miami. They are undefeated through this point in the season. They've got a tough test coming up after the bye week when they travel to face Louisville, but kind of temper your expectations. Obviously, like I said, they realistically could have and probably should have lost each of their last 2 games. So we will see where they end up. Coming in at number 6, we have Georgia, and obviously a decent bounce back against a pretty pitiful Auburn team after their road loss to Alabama the week before. Georgia might be the most talented team in the country. They're year in and year out, 5-star factory. Not a whole lot else needs to be said. This is a team that has a decent chance at winning out. Obviously, they've got a very tough schedule, but Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs can definitely get it done. So we will see where they end up. Starting at number 5, we have the Alabama Crimson Tide. And this was probably the toughest team to rank because they have probably without a doubt the best win of the season on their schedule, obviously beating Georgia. And they may have one of the worst losses of the season, losing at Vanderbilt last week. This was a very difficult decision. Obviously, like I said before, I value on-field results. Alabama beat Georgia. They deserve to be ranked higher for the time being. Even with the loss to Vanderbilt, I still think that this is a team that is definitely capable of making a run to the playoff and getting in one of those top 4 seeds. So we will see what happens with them, but could not justify ranking them higher than 5 right now after the disaster against Vanderbilt last week. Coming in at number 4, we have Penn State, who hasn't played a close game yet this year. I mean, they had a 21-7 victory over Illinois a couple weeks ago, and that was by far their closest game. I mean, didn't really do a whole lot against a pretty bad UCLA team last week, but still managed to win pretty comfortably. Penn State is one of the more talented teams in college football. I am a habitual James Franklin hater. I am a believer that he will lose a game when the opportunity is presented to him, but cannot put it past them right now. They have earned a 5-0 start. They have earned a top 4 spot in the rankings thus far. At number 3, we have Oregon. And Oregon was the number 2 and 3 spot was very difficult to rank because obviously these two are going up against each other this week, and they've had fairly similar starts to the season. Both had a couple lackluster games. However, I give the edge to Ohio State because they really haven't been in danger of losing any of their games. Whereas Oregon, first game of the season, they needed a late touchdown to pull away from Idaho. They had a close one against Boise State. They looked a little bit shaky to start the year. Obviously, they've rattled off a couple nice victories, blowing out Oregon State in Civil War, then taking care of business against a bad, UCLA team. And then obviously we all saw what they did to Michigan State this past week. It'll be very interesting to see how they handle the number 2 team in these rankings, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State has just kind of taken care of business all year long to start. Like I said, they've had a couple performances that haven't necessarily been super awe-inspiring, but they've managed to take care of business against every team they've played against. Their closest win this year was last week against Iowa when they beat them 35-7. That's their closest win this year. So, I mean, Ohio State is routinely one of the more talented teams in the country. Ryan Day is a very good football coach. They are one of the teams to beat in the Big Ten. Obviously, we will learn a ton about both Oregon and Ohio State after this week's monumental matchup in Eugene. And that leads me to the number one spot in the J Walsh rankings, the Texas Longhorns. I don't think there's really any debate about this one. Texas has looked like the best team in the country just about all year. Really have not played a close game. They passed their first test of the season with flying colors going into Ann Arbor and just absolutely dismantling a Michigan team in a game that was not as close as the final score indicated. They've got a tough test coming up in the Red River rivalry this week against Oklahoma, but you know, they've gotten it done with their starting quarterback, Quinn Ewers. They've gotten it done with the backup Arch Manning in the game. This is the best team in the country as of right now, and they deserve the number one spot in the rankings. So that concludes the reveal of the J Walsh rankings. If we want to get into the playoff seeding, I will allow you guys to pull. There we go. All right. So with the playoff seeding, we will have 8 versus 9 seed, Georgia versus Tennessee, with the winner playing Texas in the All-State Sugar Bowl. That's kind of a weird side of the bracket right now with an all-SEC quarterfinal guaranteed, but obviously, like we said before, this is not a predictive measure, just what would happen if the season were to end right now. Then we move to 5 versus 12, Oregon versus Boise State, because the top 4 seeds are filled with the top 4 conference champions. And right now, Ohio State is in the 2 spot with the Big Ten champion. So Oregon automatically slides in at the 5 seed. And they would play against, or the winner of that game would play against Iowa State in the Fiesta Bowl. And then we have Penn State versus Notre Dame in the, or we have Penn State and the Notre Dame in the 6 versus 11 seed game, with the winner playing Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. And then to round it out, we have the 7 seed Alabama versus the 10 seed BYU, with the winner facing Miami in the Peach Bowl. The first team out in this hypothetical playoff bracket would be Texas A&M, followed by Indiana, Ole Miss, and Illinois. So with that being said, I will open the floor to you guys. I've talked for a while now. I would love to hear your input and kind of see where everyone's heads are at within this ranking process.
I think I'll go first. My biggest complaint, and it's not really a complaint because I see it a lot, is Georgia and Alabama. Now, I understand Alabama won, and I understand winning the game is all that matters. But if you watch the game, Georgia, was in control of the game. Once they got their head out of their ass, they were the better football team. And now I understand one score in Tuscaloosa, and that lost to Vanderbilt. I understand everybody's going to have their stinkers, and Georgia's going to have the stinker of their own at some point in the first half against Alabama. Hell, the first 3 quarters were unwatchable. I think my only other complaint is I think Kansas State should be in the top 15. I think them and BYU are by far the 2 best teams in the Big 12 so far, and Kansas State had their stinker against BYU. And I think if they play again on a neutral site, or even they just get another shot at BYU, I think it's a really good football game. So that's probably my biggest thing. I don't think Illinois is a top 15 team, but otherwise I think you have the best 15 or so teams in college football to this point this year.
Yeah, and I guess I'll go next. I kind of agree with Matt there. I feel, Illinois, I mean, obviously it's at 15, kind of a borderline situation type there. Honestly, the biggest one to me is Iowa State. Just seeing them already having a bye, and I know it's because it's top 4 conference champions, which honestly may be kind of stupid. Given that, like, obviously you're going to end up in a situation like this, and then you have like an Oregon or an Alabama playing a first round game. That obviously that's not your rankings fault. That's more the playoffs fault. But I mean, I think we're kind of around, if teams keep playing like they are, we're kind of looking at what we'll probably somewhat see. Obviously, there's a lot of time for things to change. I mostly look at like the Big 12. I mean, there's a chance by November. Both BYU and Iowa State are nowhere near this, just given what the Big 12 has become this year. But I feel like for the SEC and the Big 10, I think we're kind of looking at the teams we'll see in there. Obviously, Boise State slips up. I think the G5 spot kind of just becomes a shit show, basically, because I don't think there's one truly great group of 5 team out there. If Boise State loses and, who knows? If Army and Navy keep winning, we could get in a weird situation there. But overall, I think this is kind of a little bit to be expected for what we've seen so far this college football season.
Yeah, I would second what Nick says. I think the Big 12 overall just been a crapshoot this year, and it's going to continue to be. It is just it's wide open. Hell, we could see. Doubt this happens, but we could see Colorado win this conference. It's just so wide open right now. Even with Utah, we don't even know what Cam Rising's situation is. He's been out for a while. We don't even know if he's going to continue to even play. I'm just looking at this Big 12, and like you said, Nick, it's just wide open, and we'll see where it goes from there. And then, like you said, if Boise State slips up, that would be amazing if we can get one of the service academies into the playoff. That would be just absolute craziness, and that would be awesome theater right there. And I wanted to talk about this later, but could you imagine Army Navy in the AAC championship and having to play the actual game a week later? That would be absolutely crazy. So
yeah, just to kind of add on to that, Jay, if we end up in a situation where that kind of happens, and let's say both are still technically undefeated, I don't think the actual game matters for playoff rankings. It will just be the AAC title. So there could be a potential where whoever wins the AAC title gets that G5 spot and then loses the next week to obviously the other service academy, which creates a vastly weird situation. But that's much farther down the line than we are right now.
A question about the AAC championship game format.
Yeah.
The AAC doesn't have a set site, correct?
I believe that is correct. I think it's the higher seed technically, but
so we could get Army Navy on a campus on Army or Navy. Wow. I need it. I need it more than I needed it before, just for them to play on a neutral site the next week and actually pack the stadium. But still, the more I think about it, the more perfect and the more America needs an AAC championship game in West Point or in Annapolis. Doesn't really matter, but West Point would be slightly cooler.
I think people kind of are overlooking this a little bit, on how real this possibility could be. Both of them play Notre Dame later on in the season. That is obviously a marquee victory if you can add that onto your resume. Now, I don't see either team beating Notre Dame this year, but Notre Dame did lose to Northern Illinois. So I don't see Notre Dame losing to both service academies. So it may take a while for that. But unless you guys have anything else, I think that there was a brilliant first J Walsh rankings of the season. So J Walsh, we very much thank you for those rankings. And we will, of course, be back next week with the next installment, the week 8 installment of the J Walsh rankings. But before we move on to week 8, we got to get through week 7 first. And like I mentioned, it's a packed slate of good games. Betting on them, not so great, but let's get straight into it. It's a game we mentioned earlier. It is the Red River rivalry, showdown, shootout, whatever you want to call it. I feel like it changes its name every single year, but it's at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. It's Texas and Oklahoma. Texas, a 14.5-point favorite. The over-under 49.5. Matt, we'll kind of start with you. This is going to be an interesting week for Texas. They're coming off a bye week. they watched everything collapse in front of them SEC wise last week, especially, Alabama. First Red River game in the SEC. What are you kind of expecting from this one?
This is going to be an interesting one because, as I just got done saying, Texas, in my mind, is pretty much by far the best team in the country. However, this is one of those games, this is one of those rivalry games that feels like no matter who the better team is, it's pretty much always closer than it realistically should be. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it feels like obviously they had the 49-0 blowout a couple years ago in favor of Texas. But aside from that game, it feels like this game has been a one score, maybe single digit game for the last decade. I mean, both of these teams are fairly talented. I would probably lean Oklahoma plus 14.5 simply because of the emotions of this game and just saying, hey, this is a rivalry. This is one of the premier rivalry games in the sport. It's pretty much always closer than it should be. I would probably lean Oklahoma here, but it would not surprise me to see Texas win this game by a substantial margin, seeing as they are the best team in the country.
And then Matt, we'll move on to you. Kind of what are your thoughts on this game?
Okay, so my bad. I completely cut out when it was most important. I think in this game, I'm torn because 14.5 is a lot of points for a top 25 matchup against two teams that do not like each other very much. And 3:30 is a long time for these two fan bases to drink before kickoff, which is quite scary. But the thing I don't understand is all the public money is on Oklahoma. I think it's 6, which is concerning to me because you would think the way Oklahoma has performed so far this year, they haven't given me any reason to believe that they will be able to sniff Texas. I feel like I have to lean Texas in this situation. Doesn't matter which quarterback they trot out there. Their backup quarterback's better than your quarterback unless you're one of like 6 teams in this country. So Texas is giving no reason. I know last week, I think we kind of emptied the bullets last week on the whole upsets and people not showing up. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's just a constant theme. Maybe we have a 2007 college football season situation on our hands where everybody keeps losing. But at some point, I think this week kind of corrects itself with some of these big time matchups, and I think Texas takes care of business. 14.5 is a lot, but I think they'll cover it.
And then Jay, do you think it matters for Texas who starts in this game, or is this kind of just another rolling for them in the Red River rivalry?
I think it does. I mean, Quinn Ewers is more experienced, obviously. Arch Manning, if he does end up starting, like, we don't know how he's going to be. This is his first Red River game. I mean, he's technically a freshman. I think he's a sophomore anyways. I mean, this is his first year actually playing. I would just say I kind of lean with Matt here. I just think a lot of money's on Oklahoma. Texas is the much better team. Oklahoma's just not very good this year. I think they're kind of in a retool under Brett Venables. Got to have Jackson Arnold develop and just kind of get things rolling for next year. But that's a lot of points. I'd probably lean Texas, but don't love that bet just because, this game, you never really know what's going to happen in this game. These two teams have been going at it for years, and just a lot of crazy stuff happens in this game. So I'd probably lean Texas in the spot, and you got to lean the over in this game. It's the Red River Shootout for a reason. So I would probably lean the over as well. So.
And I'd have to agree with you on that last point, Jay. Just given that it's the Red River Shootout, you gotta roll with the over here. I lean a little bit more towards Oklahoma State plus that 14.5, just because it's a rivalry game. Feels like they usually stay close. Obviously, Texas could shock us all and just absolutely, blow the doors off of Oklahoma on this one. But think it stays within the number. So given that, we'll move on to the second game here on our sheet. It is Penn State minus 4.5. They're traveling to the Coliseum to take on USC. Penn State 4.5-point favorite in this one. The over-under is 50.5. Fun fact, Penn State has to travel almost an hour to Harrisburg, or actually, no, I think it's 2 hours. They have to travel to Harrisburg to fly to LA because the State College Airport will not allow them to fly a big enough plane to get to LA with fuel sizes. James Franklin very much complaining about that yesterday in the press conferences. Jay, we'll start with you on this one. It's kind of seemed like teams from the East in the Big Ten traveling over to the West Coast have kind of struggled a lot this year. You think that continues with Penn State, or does USC, look like USC?
I don't know. USC is just weird. I mean, you lose to Minnesota. I mean, it's big. Like, they're kind of being exposed to Big Ten football this year, the different conference. But Penn State is traveling across the country for this. I do kind of play a factor in that. This game is, I have no idea what to do with this game. I probably stay away from this because we don't know what USC we're going to get. Are we going to get the USC against LSU? Or are we going to get good Miller Moss? Or are we going to get a team that's just going to lay down against a Big Ten team and just die? I mean, I'd probably lean Penn State in the spot because even though they haven't been good against the spread this year, I mean, Penn State still is a very, very pretty good football team. And USC is just not. I mean, they're kind of in a, I wouldn't say like a retool, but they're not ready for Big Ten play yet. They've been pretty disappointing this year, especially that loss against Minnesota. Like, that just can't happen. So I'd probably lean Penn State. Don't love that at all as well, but I can definitely see USC pulling this off. But I'd probably lean Penn State.
J Walsh, will go to you next. Where are your kind of feelings in this one? Because obviously that loss for USC last week just doesn't look good, really, in any situation. And Penn State, I mean, they've looked dominant this year, but they really haven't had like a true road game, it feels like, where they've had to travel a far distance like they are with USC.
Definitely. I mean, both those points are true. This game, I actually do feel pretty strongly about. This is, in fact, my lock of the week this week. I'm riding with Penn State. And the reasoning behind that is I'm not focusing quite as much on the loss last week to Minnesota as much as I am focusing on USC's earlier season loss to Michigan. Because in that game, they lost to a Michigan team that was not capable of throwing the ball downfield. They knew Michigan was going to run the ball, and they could not stop it. Now they're going up against a Penn State team that has two elite running backs in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They are going to run wild on this USC defense. And that's another thing is teams that travel across the country. I feel like teams that tend to run the ball and want to just kind of ram it down your throat, I feel like they tend to fare better in those games where a time zone difference could come into play. I feel like it's a lot more reliable when you're able to just ground and pound, run the ball down their throat. So I'm riding with Penn State. Like I said, this is my lock of the week. I'm taking Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to just absolutely do horrendous things to this USC defense.
And then Matt, we'll close off with you. Just kind of give us your thoughts about this Big Ten matchup. Obviously, felt like both at the beginning of the season would be in contention for the college football playoffs. It really feels like only one now is.
Well, I think with this game, it's a lot of people love Penn State because, and like J Walsh pointed out, the glaring, they love to run the football. They're averaging over 200 yards a game, and USC can't stop shit on the run. But I think we saw some things, especially in the second half of the USC-Michigan game, where I think USC kind of has the edge. And I kind of talked about this, why Rutgers would beat Michigan last weekend, because they had played a similar style. They've kind of gotten used to playing against, a Rutgers team that just loves running. And Drew Aller is a much better quarterback than Alex Orji. And the running backs, Allen, Singleton, I honestly would argue are better than Mullings and Edwards. I don't think many people would bat an eye at that, especially for how Michigan's backfield has performed this year, specifically Donovan Edwards. But 96% of the night, 94% of the bets are on Penn State spread. And I can't get behind that because I can't trust Penn State. This is such a game that James Franklin loves to lose. And we've seen teams this year, they haven't had tough schedules early in the year. You know, you look at even Tennessee to an extent. You look at Ole Miss. You look at I don't want to throw Georgia in there because going to Tuscaloosa is a completely different beast. But we have these teams that go on the road the first time, play in these difficult environments, and just aren't ready for it. And I think USC, if we get the second half USC versus Michigan, USC wins this, or at the very least, they cover the 5.5. Because that's the other thing. The spread jumped from 4 to 5.5. I can see USC keeping this game close. And Penn State enough to be 6, almost maybe by kickoff, it might be the line might be all the way up to 6 or 6.5, and I just can't justify Trojans this week.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt, I gotta agree with you on that. Like, I don't know if I can trust them this week. This just seems like a weird game. Like, I'm staying as far away as possible from this. I don't love this game at all. I've seen the proof of the teams kind of traveling from either coast this year. I like USC to keep it within the number. It's just I'm staying away as far as possible from this one. So we'll move on to game 3 here on our show sheet. This is a big one, Big Ten Saturday night, the NBC game, 7:30, 4:30 Pacific. It is Ohio State traveling to Autzen to take on Oregon. Ohio State, a 3.5-point favorite in this one. The over-under is 52.5. Matt, we'll start with you just because it's the topic of the Oregon Ducks. The big win last week point-wise against Michigan State. Didn't cover, though, because of a late field goal. So, MSU covers that one. But Oregon kind of looked back to their winning ways of just dominance last week. I know a little bit of struggle in the red zone in the first half. Kind of figured it out in the second half. Ohio State is a completely different animal, though, Matt, for Oregon compared to basically anything they've faced this year.
Well, right now the line sits at 3.5, and everybody keeps betting Ohio State, and that's why the line's jumped up to 3.5. And at 3.5, I take Oregon because all they have to do is keep this game within a field goal, and I think they will. But when it comes down to just deciding who's going to win, which I think Oregon very much can, I think Dylan Gabriel's going to play much better. He might have been his worst game as a Duck on Friday, especially in that first half with a couple red zone turnovers and some mistakes. But my thing here that I worry about with Ohio State quarters, where you come out in the second half, and if you can stomp on a team right before the fourth quarter, it's hard to come back from that. And that's my biggest concern for Oregon is I still don't think they've put together a full 4-quarter performance yet this year. Maybe it's time. But at the end of the day, when I look at it, you have 2 of the best 3 teams in the country, and one of them has the better quarterback. And that team is also playing at home at night in a place that is not easy to get to and not easy to win in. So I have to go with the Ducks in this situation, even though I think Ohio State, it might even be an Alabama-Georgia situation where Ohio State outplays Oregon. But I still think Oregon finds a way to cover and win this football game.
J Walsh, we'll go to you next. As Matt mentioned, it really does feel like the Ducks have yet to play a full 4 quarters of football this season. Is that going to be a problem against Ohio State if they don't play their first full 60 minutes of football this week?
Absolutely, it will be. I mean, these are kind of the rare regular season games in college football where the top teams in the country face off against somebody who is equally as talented. I mean, this is obviously going to be the first time for both of these teams playing a team this season that has the same amount of talent. So the thing that I'm looking for in this game is when talent is equal, I look to coaching. I think realistically speaking, Ryan Day may have a slight edge on Dan Lanning, but I don't think that that's enough to necessarily swing the outright game to Ohio State. So the next thing I look at is location. Obviously, this is being played at Oregon, like Matt said, in a night game. Very tough environment. Autzen is one of the toughest places to play. I I feel like I have to take Oregon with this line. I don't necessarily feel good about it because I definitely think that there's a fairly easy route for Ohio State to win this game. But I think the combination of traveling across the country, playing in a night game at one of the toughest places to play against a team that is just as talented as you are, and as Matt said, Oregon has the better quarterback. I think all of that is going to prove to be just a little bit too much for Ohio State. I think if this game is played at a neutral site, I think differently, and I think Ohio State takes it. But because it's being played across the country at Autzen at night, I'm rolling with the Ducks here.
And then Jay, we'll kind of look at the other side. We mentioned that it feels like Oregon hasn't played a full 60 minutes of football this year. It also kind of feels that same way with Ohio State. They really have struggled in first halves this year. It kind of feels like if Oregon is going to win this game, they have to pounce in the first half. You agree with that?
I do. And, Ohio State really hasn't played anybody. And against Michigan State, they got off to a pretty tough start. I mean, you got the interception, should have been 2 interceptions by Howard in the first half, but in that game in East Lansing. But I look for Ohio State to get off to a good start. I don't know. I look at the location as well. J Walsh, I agree with you. Eugene's one of the toughest places to play. I think, that's going to be really, really tough for Ohio State. So I am going with the Ducks as well. Even if Ohio State wins, the 3.5 I just think is too easy in this spot. Traveling across the country, Dylan Gabriel is the better quarterback. I also think Oregon's offensive line is really, really good. If you can get Jordan James going, who trounced all over MSU the last game, they get a really, really good chance to win this game. And then I also lean the under because both of these defenses are really, really good. Oregon's defense is just really, really good linebacker play and really, really good defensive line. So I lean the under in this game, but I do think the Ducks can get it done at home behind that crowd. And I just think, in the beginning of the season, I picked the Ducks to win the Big Ten, and we look at this game as a pivot point for both these teams. I'm going to stick with my gut. I'm going to go with Oregon. I still think they can win this Big Ten, and it starts this weekend. So,
and I mean, I kind of agree with you there, Jay. It kind of does feel like for both sides, this is a pivot point for the weekend. The winner, I think, has an inside track to Indianapolis in December. I think the loser has a little bit more of a tougher path unless teams just keep, if the Big Ten starts cannibalizing itself, I think it becomes better for the loser of this game. But I mean, you look at a team like potentially in Indiana right now who currently sit undefeated. Obviously, they still got a long ways to go, but that is a team that could obviously potentially play a spoiler. So the winner feels like they have an inside track to Indy. The winner, I think I agree with the points that were made that this feels like this could be a potential Alabama-Georgia type situation where, Ohio State just kind of looks like the better team throughout, but Oregon finds a way to win it. It does have a little bit of feeling in that game. I'll take Oregon here reluctantly just because of that. It's a home team getting points. I like that, but also me and Matt have talked about this. Dan Lanning in big games little bit fraudish. Obviously, a lot of those big games were against Washington. So the question is, does he have a problem in big games or does he have a problem against Washington? Kind of find that out a little bit this weekend. I'll still reluctantly take the Ducks plus the number. But other than that, hopefully it is a good game. So given that, we will move into our committee picks. We'll take a look at the standings. There's still no change at the top. I still sit at the top somehow. It feels like my parlays suck every week, but somehow I am still up there. Matt, you have moved up to second. You sit at 21-19 with a 52.5% win percentage. J Walsh, you fall to third, 17-18, 48.6 win percentage. And Mr. J DeCoster, you still sit in the basement. We kind of talked pre-show. The board just the board hates you so far this season. I know you're still trying to find winners out there, but you just have not got any of the luck, it seems, so far this season. So we'll move into the picks. We'll start at the top, as always. So that means I will be starting off. Let's get into it. As I mentioned early on in the show, I hate the board this week. I really only had one pick, and then the other four I kind of just said, hey, I'll take a flyer on it. The one pick I love this week, and I love it, but it's not my lock of the week. Missouri minus 27.5 at UMass. UMass is god-awful. I know this is a road game, and it's being played at, I don't know, it's like Alumni Stadium or something in Amherst. I don't know if it has a nickname or not. I'm sure there will be like 15 UMass fans there. I like Missouri minus 27.5. Toledo minus 9.5 at Buffalo. I honestly, this game I kind of just picked because I think Toledo is still good. I saw Jason Candle got an extension, so I'm assuming they're still doing well. Buffalo, although they're playing on turf, has been proven that they can't play on grass. That has nothing to do with this week, but I'm fading Buffalo because of that. Army minus 25.5 versus UAB in West Point. The UAB experience with Trent Dilfer as head coach seems to be going awful currently. It does not look like good football. I like Army in this situation. Georgia Tech minus 5.5 there at North Carolina. North Carolina currently in a free fall, it seems. I think Georgia Tech picks up a victory in this one. And my lock of the week, again, I don't love it, but it's my lock because it's a home team and it seems like a low line. It is BYU minus 4.5 versus Arizona. I like the Cougars in this one. Arizona traveling up to Provo. Don't like that situation for them. So that is my 5 picks for the week. Matt, we'll move on to you. What is your parlay for this week?
We're starting off. We got 5 picks this week. I decided to kind of switch it up this week, and despite picking on Tuesday, which kind of affected my plan because it was to just look at the public money and pretty much fade the public in almost every situation because the public doesn't know shit, even though I am the public. So we got 3 noon games, 2 night games. We're going to start off we're going to take Army minus 25 versus UAB. The money's pretty 100 yards on the ground. Like, give me Army. I have no reason not to take the Black Knights in this game. Trusting the public, and that is
Matt. I hate to interrupt you there, but
why is Mr. Walsh laughing so hard?
I hate to interrupt you there, and I don't know if it was my connection or your connection, but your reasoning for picking Army in that game was basically boiled down to Army has run the ball, and so give me Army in that game. So I don't know.
I can
exactly
assure you that's not what I
said.
said, but maybe that's how it came across these internet waves.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what was said in the middle there, but honestly, riveting analysis. I trust you fully.
Anyway,
Rocking with Army.
all right, moving on. Army is also my lock of the week, by the way. Um, moving on, this is the one game I am trusting the public for, and it is Rutgers -2.5 versus Wisconsin. Why on earth Wisconsin is 2.5-point underdogs in Piscataway? This is telling me that Wisconsin would be favored at home, and I don't think, or on a neutral site, this would be a pick 'em. And Rutgers is the best football team, and I know they struggle to put up points, but Wisconsin can't even run the ball anymore. They don't know who they are, and they're going into a physical environment against a really well coached team. Kyle Monangai is going to run the football well. I think they cover the 2.5. If it gets beyond 3, I think it gets a little dicey because I think it's going to be a low scoring game. But 2.5, I like the Scarlet Knights to cover. My third noon game is Clemson on the road at Wake Forest. I'm taking the Tigers -20. Wake Forest isn't any good. I think Clemson is actually a pretty good football team. And if I'm not mistaken, J Walsh, they were not in your top 15, and they should be because I think this football is pretty good despite losing to Clemson week 1. 80% of the money and the spread picks is on Wake Forest for some reason. Wake Forest. I think Clemson's might be better than Ole Miss based on what we've seen to this point, and Ole Miss took care of business in Winston-Salem. So I'm taking Clemson in this scenario. Now we're moving into the night games. I to take the Tennessee Volunteers 14.5-point favorites. It's jumped to 15 in some spots, despite the fact that Florida has 80% of the money on them. So the public loves Florida, and yet the spread has grown in Tennessee's direction. That points to me Tennessee's going to spread, and it's not going to be close. And truly, the way I look at it, Tennessee's a much better football team. Sure, they laid an egg last week against I think a pretty decent Arkansas team. Florida isn't any good. On the road at night, Neyland. Tennessee's due for a big bounce back. Give me the Volunteers at home. And then my last pick of the week is the Oregon Ducks. 93% of the bets, 90% of the money is on Ohio State. I don't understand. I understand why people might like Ohio State in this game, but I can't comprehend why 90% of people would take Ohio State in this scenario in Autzen at night. I like the Ducks in this situation. I believe it's a blackout. If I'm not, a shout during the third quarter is going to be electric. Hopefully NBC doesn't even go to break. They just leave it and show the crowd for 3.5 minutes. They won't do that because money, but they should because it's awesome and college football rocks. So those are my picks. So I'm taking Clemson -20 at Wake Forest, Rutgers -2.5 versus Wisconsin, Army -25 versus UAB, the Tennessee Volunteers -14.5 versus Florida, and then the Oregon Ducks +3.5 versus the Ohio State Buckeyes.
All right, Jay Walsh, you are up. What is your parlay for this week?
All right, we are looking for a bounce back after a rough 1-4 week last week. Looking to get back into the above 500 range of the season total. So without further ado, my first pick of the week will be the Maryland Terrapins -9.5 against Northwestern. Mostly because this is a home game for Maryland against a mediocre at best Northwestern team. Maryland at times has looked shaky this season, but they, for the most part, have been fairly solid. And as I said, I really just think this Northwestern team is pretty no good. So I'm rolling with Maryland here. My next pick, I am taking Alabama in a major bounce back, getting -21.5 at home against South Carolina. Mostly because I think if they don't cover this game, or God forbid, if they lose this game, Kalen DeBoer might get run out of the state of Alabama by the end of next week. This is kind of a must-win for him after shitting down his leg against Vanderbilt last week. This is prime bounce back territory for Alabama. South Carolina has been very up and down this season. I don't think that they have the talent to hang with Alabama. I think the Crimson Tide are going to come out pissed. They're going to come out ready to play. I think they blitz South Carolina at home. My next pick, which we've already discussed, Penn State -4.5 at USC. That's my lock of the week. Not going to go too in depth into it. Like I said, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, going to run all over USC. My next pick, I am hopping right back on that horse that threw me off. Texas State, Arkansas State, over 63.5. Texas State, I took them as my lock last week in the over before it was announced that Troy's top two quarterbacks were both questionable in game time decisions to play. I believe their second string quarterback did play in the game, and they still should have hit the over, if not for a ridiculous interception thrown within the last couple minutes by Texas.
Sick.
Okay.
He'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
See ya. He just got the shape of Italy.
That's what he gets for picking Texas State over again.
Oh my God, yes.
Jay, we might as well start with you because he hasn't popped back immediately, which makes me think his internet maybe just died. So we'll start.
Sure.
We'll go with you, and then if he comes back, we'll just redo his. So
Sounds good. All right. Well, all right, hold on. All right, whatever. We'll just start, I guess, with me. Got a nice pack of 6 picks for you guys here. We're gonna start. Shout out Matt. Got to copy his phrase there. So I'm gonna go with Oregon as well, plus the 3.5. We already did a breakdown of this game. I just think the game's at Eugene. It's gonna be electric. I just think Oregon's still, in my gut, the best team in the Big Ten right now. I'm going to lean with Oregon plus the 3.5. Offensive line play, I think, is key here, and I think Oregon does have one of the best offensive lines in the country, so I'm going to lean with Oregon. Pittsburgh versus Cal. Pittsburgh is laying 3.5 at home. I do like Pitt in this spot, simply because Cal's got to travel across the country. Cal with a heartbreaking loss over Miami there. I'm going to lean with Pitt in this spot. Pitt is actually ranked, which, I don't know how Pitt is good, but I do like them in the spot at home at Acrisure Stadium, so I will lay the 3.5 with Pitt. Boise State and Hawaii. I love the over in this game. We always talk about how Boise State's offense has been prolific with Ashton Genty. I do think that continues. On the island, shout out the island. It's going to be a fun game at 10 o'clock Central Time. I do like the over 61.5 there. I think Boise State can easily cover this. They can probably get to 50 if they wanted to, with Ashton Genty. And then we're going to go to Illinois and Purdue. Illinois is laying 19.5 in this game. Purdue just fired their offensive coordinator. They're kind of in a mess right now, and Illinois is a pretty good football team. And they're at home. I like Illinois minus the 19.5 there. Arizona State versus Utah. Arizona State's getting 6.5 at home. This is a Friday night game. We don't know if Cam Rising's going to play. This is kind of a tough spot for Utah. Arizona State's kind of a frisky team. They beat Texas State. They're kind of, Sam Levitt's decent. Kind of an underrated team, I would say. So I will take the 6.5 with Arizona State. I think this can be closer than people think. And then I'm going to go with you guys. Army versus UAB. UAB is god awful. I will lay the 24.5 or 25, depending where you get it. I will take the 24.5 there with Army because they're just a covering machine and they just seem to do it every week. So those are my picks, and I will be taking Army. So, and then my lock is the Boise State versus Hawaii game. I did forget to tell you that the over 61.5. So.
Well, thank you for that, Jay. Jay Walsh, you have graced us with your presence once again. So why don't you just close it out? I know you only had one pick left, so just close it out for us.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what just happened there, but my final pick of my parlay is LSU money line versus Ole Miss. I believe Ole Miss is currently, the last I checked, they were favored by 3.5. I'm taking LSU in this game. It's at home at Death Valley, one of the hardest places to play in the country. As I said in the J Walsh rankings, Ole Miss has played absolutely nobody this season. They lost to basically the one competent team that they've played this year. So I don't think they're ready to play a team with LSU's level of talent and the atmosphere that they're about to travel into. Obviously, Brian Kelly is Brian Kelly, and I've been burned betting on Brian Kelly before, but I think the Tigers get this done simply because I am very much not on the Ole Miss bandwagon to start this season, and I am riding with the Tigers here, money line against Ole Miss.
All right, so I think that is going to wrap it up for this week 7 edition of the Merrifield Sportsbook Show, and of course the J Walsh Rankings. Both very prestigious things that happen in this world. So thank you so much for watching. If you just stumbled across this video, thank you for watching. We enjoy doing this every week, so make sure you like and subscribe. We'll be back here next week. Gentlemen, thank you for joining as always today. And we will once again see you next week for another episode of the Merrifield Sportsbook Show.